for some reason that says it's Unit 4, Day 4, Part 2. And Unit 4, Day 4 is what we did yesterday. So we are just continuing the same thing we did from yesterday. So if you weren't here yesterday, today is a good day to get caught up. So it says we need to state whether the triangles are congruent by side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, or hypotenuse, leg. If they're not congruent, then you need to just say not congruent. So looking at number one. First thing you need to label is you need to label any shared sides as being congruent or vertical angles as being congruent. So if you notice, these two triangles share sides. So I want you to mark that the shared side is congruent. Now I need to check to see, are these triangles congruent? So notice we are given angle, angle, side on the first triangle. I need to make sure I have the same thing on the second triangle. So we also have angle, angle, side. So are those two triangles congruent? Yes. So those two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. So those are congruent triangles by angle, angle, side. Next one, number two, the first thing you need to mark is the shared side. So notice the hypotenuse already has one tick mark showing that the hypotenuse for each of those triangles are congruent. So I want you to mark the shared side with two tick marks. So don't use one because one tick mark has already been used. So that shared side needs two tick marks. So looking at these triangles, what type of triangles are those? Right triangles. So if it's a right triangle, first I'm going to check hypotenuse leg. So do we have the hypotenuse marked as congruent? Yes. Do we have the leg marked as congruent? Yes. So these two triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. Next one, number three. First thing you need to mark is any shared side as being congruent, or if you have vertical angles. In here, we do have vertical angles right here in the middle of the diagram. So they've already done one arc mark. So for your vertical angles, you need two arc marks. So vertical angles are congruent. I'm going to make myself a note. Vertical angles are congruent. So vertical angles are always congruent. Okay, so looking at what we have, notice for the triangle on the left side we have angle, angle, side. Do we also have angle, angle, side? Yes. So are those two triangles congruent? Yes, they are congruent by angle, angle, side. So A, S for angle, angle, side. Next one, number 4. I need to add something to this diagram. What is also congruent on this diagram? The angles. Why are these angles congruent? Those are vertical angles. So again, vertical angles are always congruent. Now check to see what's marked as congruent. So for the triangle on the left, we have a side, an angle, a side. For the triangle on the right, we also have a side, an angle, a side. So are those triangles congruent? Yes. So those two triangles are congruent by this one right here. Side, angle, side. Next part. For example 2, it says use the given information to mark on the figure, complete the congruent statement, and justify your statement. So, first statement at the top. It says side AB is perpendicular to side CD. So here is AB, CD is on the bottom, and it says that AB is perpendicular to CD. So notice that gives us one pair of congruent angles. Because if it's perpendicular, they meet at 90 degrees. The next statement says that side AC is congruent to side AD. So on my diagram, I need to mark side AC, which is this one. So side AC is congruent to side AD. So here's side AD, mark those as congruent. Then it tells us that triangle ABC is congruent to what triangle? So over here we need to say triangle XYZ or whatever the letter combination is. And then we need to state what postulate or theorem. So it's just by side, angle, side, which postulate or theorem. So first we need to look at our diagram. So I have everything marked that was given to us. But I still need one more thing marked. So what is one more thing that I can mark here? The shared side. So if they have a shared side, mark your shared side as congruent. Now what types of triangles are these? Right triangles. If I have right triangles, which postulate could I use? Hypotenuse leg, HL. So do we have the hypotenuse marked as congruent? Do we have a leg marked as congruent? Yes. So these two triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. So state your postulate on the bottom. Now I have to finish this congruent statement. So I need to say the triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABD. Has to be in that order. So triangle ABD. Next part, part B, they tell us that side PR is congruent to side PS. So mark it. Here's PR, here's PS. Those are congruent. Next one says that RQ is congruent to SQ. So RQ gets 2 tick marks. SQ gets 2 tick marks. There's something else I can mark. What else can I mark? The shared side. So the shared side is also congruent. So the shared side gets 3 tick marks. So these two triangles are congruent by which postulate? Yes, notice we have a side, a side, a side. So these two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So that's my justification. Now I need to finish that congruent statement. So I need to say that triangle PQR is congruent to triangle, let's see, PQR, I agree. Triangle PQS. Triangle PQS. Okay, next one, part C. It says angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. So mark them. So angle 1 is a right angle, angle 2 is a right angle. So those angles are congruent. Then it tells me that side MN is congruent to side PO. So MN gets 1 tick mark, side PO gets 1 tick mark. And I can mark one more thing. What else can I mark? Shared side. So the shared side gets 2 tick marks. Now, if it's right triangles, I need to check to see if it's hypotenuse leg. Well, if you notice, here's the hypotenuse, here's the hypotenuse. Are the hypotenuse marked as congruent? No, we don't have any marks on the hypotenuse, so this one is not hypotenuse leg. Okay, so this one is not hypotenuse leg, but if you notice, we have a side, an angle, a side, and on the top triangle, we also have a side, angle, side. So those two triangles are congruent by which postulate or theorem? Side, angle, side. So that one was not hypotenuse leg because the hypotenuse was not marked as congruent. Now I need to finish that congruent statement and say that triangle MNO. So MNO is congruent to triangle what? We start at the top and go down the short side. So this would be C-O-N. So triangle C-O-N. Okay, question D. It tells us that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So angle 1 gets an arc mark, angle 2 gets an arc mark. Next one we have side XY is congruent to side VW. So XY gets 1 tick mark, VW gets 1 tick mark. And I can add one more thing. What else is congruent on those two triangles? The vertical angles. So I already have 1 arc mark, so my vertical angles get 2 arc marks. The vertical angles are congruent. Now I need to check to see which postulate or theorem shows that these two triangles are congruent. So if you notice, we have angle, angle, side. Over here, do we also have angle, angle, side? Yes. So those two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. Now I need to state which triangles are congruent. So triangle XYZ, so XYZ is congruent to which one? VWC. Triangle VWC. VWC. So we have to go down the side with 1 tick mark, and we have to end at the double arc mark. Okay, example 2. On each example, answer each of the following questions. Part A. So where it says A, you need to state the congruent part. Part B, how are the triangles are congruent? And then C, you need to state the congruent. So when I ask you how are the triangles congruent, you need to say it's like side, angle, side, angle, angle, side, hypotenuse, leg, etc. So when it's asking you how are they congruent, that's what it's asking you for. Postulate or theorem. And when it says to state the congruence, you need to say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle, then you would need to fill in the question mark. So it's the same thing, except this time they're not telling you what the congruent parts are. They're showing you in the diagram. We have to write it out. And then they switch the order. So we have to state the postulate and then state the congruent triangle. Okay, so part A, we need to name the congruent parts. So let's start with the angles. So let's see, this top angle, let me highlight it in red. To name this angle, how would I name that angle? That is angle what? I can't just say A because A has the 2 small parts plus A is the big angle. Yes, I need to use all 3 points here. This would be angle BAD. So angle BAD is congruent to angle this one over here, CAD. Yes, I want this angle CAD. I have to write it straight, I'm wrong. CAD. Okay, so those angles are congruent. We need 2 more that are congruent. I'm erasing all my stuff. That eraser's too big. Okay. Now, let's mark the right angle that's congruent. So right angle, right angle. How do I name that right angle? Angle BDA. BDA is congruent to the other right angle, CDA. of angles CBA. CBA. Okay, so that's what they had marked. Let me change this eraser down. But I need to add something else. What else is congruent on those triangles? The shared side. I'm going to mark the shared side as congruent. So I can say that side AB is congruent to side AB. And that should be enough to prove that these two triangles are congruent. And let me go ahead and scroll up. I see people having problems in the back. Oops. Look, I left these answers up here. Okay, so now for part B, we need to state the postulate or theorem that shows that these two triangles are congruent. So notice we have an angle, a side, an angle, and over here we also have an angle, side, angle. So for part B, those two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. And then for part C, we need to state the triangles that are congruent. So we need to say that triangle and ABC, the triangle ABC, is congruent to triangle ACD. So that one is kind of the same thing that we were just doing. I just added extra stuff for us to do. Okay, so this next one, question B. They gave us some sides that are congruent. So let's start with the one tick mark. So let's start down here. And what two sides are congruent? So side what? Side XT is congruent to side what? I need to do it in the same order. So if I did bottom to top, I need to do bottom to top. So that needs to be side YT. So XT and YT. Now the two tick marks. How can I name this one? Side TR. So side TR is congruent. Now keep that same order. So if I did T to R, this would be T to what? T to S. And we need one more congruent. So I need to add something. So what else on those triangles are congruent? The vertical angle. So mark the vertical angles as congruent. So one tick mark here, one tick mark here. So now I need to state those vertical angles that are congruent. So the first one, I'm going to say this is angle RTX. So angle RTX is congruent to angle. So if I did RTX, what would this one be over here? STY. STY. So make sure you keep the same order. So order is important here. Next part. Now I need to state the postulate or theorem as to why these triangles are congruent. So this one, we have a side, an angle, a side. Over here we have a side, an angle, a side. So what is the postulate here? Side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Last part is to state the congruent triangle. So when you say that triangle RTX is congruent to triangle, now keep the same order I used. So if I did RTX, what is the congruent triangle on the right? STY. Okay, this next one. They don't have anything marked as congruent. But what do these arrows at the top and bottom mean? Those are parallel lines. So if those are parallel lines, then this diagonal is called a transversal. So I can say that this angle and this angle are congruent because why? Those are alternate interior angles. So we can say that alternate interior angles are congruent. So let's go ahead and name those angles. So let me highlight it in red. What is the name of that angle? NPM? MPN. So angle MPN, M as in Matthew, then P, and then N. There we go. And that is congruent to this one down here. Yes, notice when we named it, we went to MPN, so we went across the one with two arrows. So we need to go across the one with two arrows. So this would be angle ONP. So this is angle ONP. Okay, so that's one set of alternate interior angles, but there's also a second set of alternate interior angles. And let me mark these in purple. So I'm going to mark this as double, this one as double. So those are also alternate interior angles, and we know that alternate interior angles are congruent. So let's name those two alternate interior angles. So how could I name that one? Angle OTN. It's congruent. Let me mark the other one. So when I named this one, I did OTN, so I went down the one with one arrow. So I need to go down the one with one arrow, so this would be MNP. So this is angle MNP. So in order for these to be congruent, I need three things that are congruent, but I only have two so far. So what is one other thing that is congruent here? The shared side, so mark the shared side as congruent. And we are going to say that side PN is congruent to side PN. Now that we have our three pairs that are congruent, now we can state the postulate or theorem. So notice we have an angle, a side, and angle. Same thing here. We have an angle, a side, and angle. So what's the postulate or theorem? Angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle. So now I can say that my triangles are congruent, so that would be triangle. I'm just going to use these up here and say triangle MPN is congruent to triangle ONP. Okay, so basically, again, that was a recap from yesterday. So the assignment is also a recap from yesterday. So for the guided practice, it says to state whether the triangles are congruent by side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, hypotenuse, leg, or not congruent. So looking at number one, we have an angle, a side, and angle. Yes, we also have an angle, side, angle. So number one, the answer is angle, side, angle. Number two, let's see, we have, I have two things marked, the right angle and then the acute angle. What else is congruent on those triangles? Shared side, so make sure you mark the shared side as being congruent. So if it's a right triangle, I can use hypotenuse flex. But on those triangles, is the hypotenuse marked as congruent? Well, the hypotenuse is, because it's a shared side, but do we have a leg pair that's marked as congruent? No, so this one you cannot use hypotenuse flex. So throw that one out. We don't have a leg that's congruent. So check to see what we do have. So starting at the right angle, we have an angle, a side. On this triangle, the top one, we also have an angle, a side. So angle, side is our congruent postulate. Let's see that. What about number 3? How is number 3 congruent? Hypotenuse leg. The hypotenuse is congruent. We have a leg pair that's congruent. Number 4, what else can be marked as congruent? Shared side. So the shared side gets 2 tick marks. And how are those 2 triangles congruent? Yes, we have a side, an angle, a side. Number 5, what do we have marked as congruent? 3 angles. So this would be angle, angle, angle. Do we have a postulate or theorem for angle, angle, angle? No. So if we don't have angle, 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 what do I write for the answer? Not congruent. And number 6, I need to add something that's congruent. What is also congruent on number 6? Mark your vertical angle that's congruent. We already have 1 arc mark, so this one gets 2 arc marks. And if you follow along the diagram, we have an angle, a side, an angle, and we also have an angle, a side, and angle. So those are congruent by what? Angle, side, angle. A to C. Whew, it keeps going, doesn't it? Mark the drawing to show the given information and fill in the blank. So this one is not as lengthy as the last one on the note, but it's still kind of lengthy. So first thing you need to do is mark up your diagram. So side DE is congruent to EC. So DE gets 1 arc mark, gets 1 tick mark, EC gets 1 tick mark. And then we have side BE gets 2 tick marks, side AE gets 2 tick marks. And I need to add 1 other pair that's congruent. What else is congruent on those triangles? Vertical angles are congruent. So mark your vertical angles as congruent. So those 2 triangles are congruent by which postulate or theorem? Yeah, we have a side, an angle, a side. So this is side, angle, side. We need to complete this congruent statement. So triangle DEB is congruent to triangle. So we have DEB. So that is congruent to what? DE goes down to 1 tick mark. So I need to go down to 1 tick mark. So it's going to be CEA. The triangle CEA. Next one, number 8. It says E is the midpoint of KW. What does midpoint mean? It's right here in the middle. So if this is the middle point, then these 2 pieces are equal. So part equals part. Definition of midpoint. Then it says triangle K, not triangle, angle KEG. So angle KEG, which is this one, is congruent to triangle, not triangle, angle WEH. So those angles, mark those as congruent. Then they also tell us that angle K is congruent to angle W. So K gets 2 arc marks, W gets 2 arc marks. So those 2 triangles are congruent by what postulate or theorem? congruent to triangle KEG is congruent to triangle. I'm not going to reinvent it. They just said KEG is congruent to what? WEH. So WEH. Okay, two more. Next one. It tells us that side NO is parallel to side MP. So those two sides are parallel. And then it tells us that angle N is congruent to angle P. So angle N and P are congruent. What else is congruent on those triangles? The shared side, so mark the shared side as congruent. I need something else. Alternate interior angles. If these two lines are parallel lines, MD is my transversal. So this angle and this angle are alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles are congruent. So these two triangles are congruent by what postulate or theorem? This one is angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. Now, if I had marked the other pair of alternate interior angles, then yeah, you could say angle, side. So triangle MNO is congruent to triangle. So MNO. I agree. OPM. Triangle OPM. And the last one we got in practice number 10, it says side FP is congruent to side HP, and angle F is congruent to angle H. For the hint, it says draw the triangle separately. So when I draw the triangle separately, we are going to separate this triangle. So let me draw it over here. So that is angle FPS. And separate it from the other triangle. And this is triangle PRH. So let's see if that's helpful at all. Hopefully our hint is helpful to it. Okay, so it says that side FP, so here's FP, it is congruent to side HP. Then it tells us that angle F is congruent to angle H. So angle F is congruent to angle H. Now, in order for those to be congruent, we have to have three things that are congruent. So right now we only have two things. We have an angle pair and a side pair. So we're missing one thing. Well, we don't have parallel lines here, so we're not going to have alternate angles. But if you look, we have angle FPS, angle HPR, or triangles. What do they have in common? FPS, RTH. What do they have in common? They both have what letters? They both have P. If I look at the original diagram, you agree that angle is congruent to itself? So this angle is actually for both triangles. So notice that angle is on this triangle in red. And let me switch my colors. That same angle is also on triangle blue. Do you agree? Yeah. So that's going to be a shared angle. So mark the shared angle as congruent. So those two triangles are congruent by what postulate or theorem? angle, side, angle. So by angle, side, angle. So we have triangle PFS is congruent. So we have PFS. So I need to start at the double angle, go down to one side with the sigma. Yeah, PHR. The triangle PHR